What you did the night I was so sick in bed, son? You remember that one now, don't you, lad?
Well, couldn't Riley do it for you tonight, Father? Got to have a little music behind me now, you know that.
But I've got the music box. You sang with it once. You can do it again. Won't you try now, son?
Well, shouldn't be a pleasure to do it for you.
Let's open it right up and she'll play now.
Who are your heroes? Who influenced your work? Well, I mean, maybe you weren't aware of it at the time, but when you think back in retrospect.
Chaplin, Stan Laurel. Stan Laurel taught me time, film time, not real time. He taught me film time. Chaplin taught me human time. I didn't know I was being taught those things until some years passed when I started to examine, where did I learn that? Or how do I know that's right? Particularly when I started to direct performers in films, I would question, how do I know that's right? How do I know it? I know it's right. How do I know it's right?
You always looked like you were improvising, and yet you always treated film comedy, you said it, as a science.
Absolutely.
You mean all of the things, it wasn't a series of 80 takes and let's pick out the one that's funny. You choreographed most of the things you did in film?
Most choreographed, most rehearsed, and then take one. The film saw the most spontaneous end result of all of the planning. In other words, I said one day to an interviewer, I said, some of my best ad-libs have taken 6, 7 hours.
It's true.
If I could rehearse and choreograph the visual sequence that I was doing long enough, by the time it came to take one, it was the one I'd print. But not to rehearse it and to play with it on film, you're now printing take 12. And take 12 has lost spirit, energy, and spontaneity.
You and Dean, and I say this with all due respect to Abbott and Costello, and to Smith and Dale, and to Willie and Eugene Howard, and it goes on and on and on and on. And maybe even Laurel and Hardy. I mean, you were the only one I know could take a celery off a table and hit a lady on the head with it. Gee, isn't that wonderful? I do it, that, you know, I'd be lynched. Did you know you could do it, or you just didn't care? Devil make you said, I'll go for anything.
No, I knew. I knew that as long as the intention was clear within myself, because I didn't have the heart to be cruel to get a laugh at her expense, but what I did have was an understanding that she would understand that I'm only 9. And I don't know any better. So to pick up the celery and hit your head is right. And the audience knew that.
Now, before we went on the air, you took a drink of water. Could
Yeah.
you show the audience how Jerry Lewis drinks water?
Like any other normal person. If I was to lift my head then, I would, of course, drown.
Yeah.
So I don't do that.
Now, why do we understand each other?
I love that. Tyvish.
When you were growing up, were you watching people?
I got this from the lady that I saw in the restaurant do this. Now, mind you, if she was in dire need of water and had come off the desert, her training and her upbringing, or whoever this lady is, doesn't allow her to go any further than this. She doesn't get any water. She's still thirsty, but at least she looked good going for it.
But you said a 9-year-old would go for
Oh, yeah, brother!
I've lost more sound
I
mixers.
was just going to say, that's probably one of the most famous sounds in show business. I mean, Jolson would go, mining, you know. But that, oh, I can't even do it. I'd lose my uppers. You once said that you never thought of Dean Martin as a straight man.
Dean was the finest actor that ever lived. The finest actor that ever lived. Without question, the greatest straight man that ever walked on a stage. You see, what Dean had was what George Burns honed for 50 years. Dean was born with. And that was a sense of breathing time, what I call breathing time. I could turn my head away, and Dean would feel in a breath when I'd be back at him. He would know to lay out, or he'd know to start the process. He also had the fantastic capacity to turn from straight man to the comic.
He could get laughs, oh, tremendous.
There's no question about his innate sense of comedy. And what he taught me through his instinct was, when I laid back, he, in some way, telegraphed to me, you're going to play straight now. I can't tell you how he did that or what, but it happened on that stage.
And never rehearsed it.
Never rehearsed the change of time. Never rehearsed the change of position. The interesting thing is, Alan, I'll tell you something I've never told anyone before. Everybody always called me the little guy. You guys that sat at Lindy's after a Copa show would say, and the little guy then did, trying to explain what Martin and Lewis were. I was 6 feet tall and still am. Dean is 6 feet tall. I worked in a crouch. And that was by design, because when you're saying, Mister, don't hurt me.
And you were also very thin.
Okay, I weighed 120, and care packages were coming constantly, you know.
And 100 pounds of hair in those days, what a thing wrapped around laying
Such
down.
pomade. And the pants up to here with short suspenders.
Right.
4-inch suspenders. So I was the little guy because I worked in the crouch. Now, I looked at some film only a month ago because of a project we're doing for Disney. I'm looking at some of the Martin and Lewis films. When Dean took the comedy, he crouched. And I took full height. And I swear to you, Alan, we never sat together and spoke about changing physical demeanor when these things would happen.
You know what was marvelous about your relationship on stage? And if you think about it, Laurel and Hardy, Smith and Dale, Burns and Allen, go on and on and on. Even though you were playing the fool, as Gracie did, you know, with George, you always felt that George really was crazy about Gracie Allen. He didn't look at her with disdain. He looked at her, you know, like, is she silly, but isn't she cute? Yeah. Dean never looked at you as if you were a fool. Up there.
Oh, no. No.
You know, he was like a big brother. Now, behave yourself kind of thing.
Now, you said something that I've never heard in an interview, and I've done 1,000 of them. When you said, even maybe Laurel and Hardy, at the opening discussion, the only thing that might smack of Laurel and Hardy was the love of the two men. I don't know that Ole and Chick had that.
Olsen
I don't
and
know
Johnson,
that.
no, I don't.
I don't know that Bud and Lou had that. But what Dean and I had, and we knew it, was this love affair. He loved this kid. The kid character. For that matter, I can tell you, in all honesty, I think he loved me most on the stage.
Right, it showed.
Rather than off, because off we were on an equal level. We were talking business, we were talking high numbers and all of that stuff. My feelings for him was brother, was father, was hero. I mean, he was my Schwarzenegger. This handsome man who the women went crazy for. Little did I know he was reading books in between shows, and I had all the broads. Yeah. I didn't know that he didn't have 9 at the same time.
I'll be right back inside the comedy mind of Jerry Lewis in the history of show business.
July 25th, 1956.
You've been asked this 1,000,000 times. What happened?
We had a 10-year marriage and a 10-year love affair. And marriages are wonderful. And I would suspect that the reason that honeymoons are just for the bride and groom are because if you add any people to it, they'll create problems. Well, Dean and I had a honeymoon for the better part of 8.5 years, and then we invited some people to the honeymoon. That's what happened.
You're talking about wives now, eh?
Wives, outside interests.
You start different lawyers, different...
Lawyers, attorneys, friends. Friends are the most dangerous, by the way. Strangers can't get close enough, so watch out for the friends. But at the same time, in being as forthright as I know how to be, everything was Jerry. Everything with the team, if you remember, was Jerry the businessman. Jerry was opening night at the Copa, the little guy, or Jerry this, Jerry that. If the tables were turned, Alan, I would have psychologically gone nuts after 2 or 3 years of that. Dean took 10 years of taking second banana or second position, or was diminished by the platitudes or by the plateau that I was placed on. It had to start to drive him crazy here, and I was starting to feel that it was, and now I'm trying to diminish me somewhat and uplift him somewhat.
But you also said, at the time of the breakup, I can't be restricted in my comedy. I have to do comedy as I see it. I want to direct. Dean didn't feel that you should be directing Martin?
Oh, there was no question about it.
He didn't want, he had enough of you being this.
He believed that what we had is what we should have lived with. And when I started to feel the need for growth, I made it very apparent to him. So I was really the reason that the split happened. I was responsible for it.
I want to hold it right there. We'll be right back.
Anyone for 11?
You know, in your autobiography, you talk about an 8-year addiction to Percodan, about the spine injury and the open heart surgery. There's a line that said that you said that being a celebrity can kill you.
Sure.
When did you know physically that you were, in a sense, that your body was starting to fall apart?
Trying to get up in the morning. That milk box, I've been paying for that since. That was like when I was 10 years old, let's say. I'm 65. I've had 55 years of pain. It's minimal in the beginning, and then it gets a little stronger midway. And when you get to around this age, you pay for those pratfalls. You have to remember that in over 48 films, I did all my own stunts. And I was warned then, you're going to pay for that. Going out of a 2-story window into corrugated boxes, even though it's protected. I had great stuntmen to lay out the stunts for me. I was stupid in doing those things because the camera was wide enough and back enough that it could have been Nellie Lutcher coming out of that window.
Nellie Lutcher.
You know. And no one would know.
Nobody knows. Nellie
Nobody
Lutcher
would know
doesn't
the
know who
difference.
Nellie Lutcher is.
It could have been Lily Tomlin,
That's
and
it.
they would have never known.
Okay.
Okay? I had to take the fall from the 2-story window.
Well, also the fact that you grew up knowing that Keaton did his own stunts.
You bet.
And
You
Harold
bet he
Lloyd
did.
did his own stunts.
You bet. And Stan Laurel did every stunt they ever did. Now, there's no thanks for that because the joke is going to work using the stuntman because the cut is less than 24 frames, which is not even quite 2 feet. So I get up in the morning now, if I have an 8 o'clock call as I did this morning to meet with you, I put the foot off the bed at 8, and at 8:04 I can get the other one off. So you pay for that. But it's worth it because you have a wonderful recollection of all the laughs that it got.
Can you really get over that kind of pain by thinking about what joy you've had?
Yes, absolutely. The only problem that I had was when I got on Percodan, which is probably the most insidious drug you can ever take, and became addicted to it. It was relieving the pain, but then I was beginning to use it to relieve psychological and emotional pains. You can't do that. That becomes, then you're just a drug addict.
Your head was Your head wasn't working as well,
No,
obviously.
there was a period between 1975 and 1987 where I can't tell you anything. They tell me I did a telethon each one of those years.
Really?
They tell me I did a couple of films. I did 2 in Europe. I did 4 here. I don't remember any of it. There's a block. There's a 6-7 year block. I have no recollection of. That's what Percodan will do to you.
Marty Scorsese, he directed you in King of Comedy. He said he has a black side to him, and people recognize it. Now, was he talking about that Jerry Langford character you were playing? Or was he talking about Jerry Lewis? Or was he talking about both? Tell me, is there a black side
Yes,
to Jerry Lewis?
absolutely. I think he was talking about me. Langford was a character who was not unlike me. So he was talking about me and Langford, or me. But of course there's a black side. As long as I am part of the human condition, I've got the same black side you do, and every other human being.
In the film, Hardly Working, you play an out-of-work clown, Bo Hooper. In describing Bo Hooper, you said he's not always clowning. Sometimes he's a very serious person with very real emotions. But put Bo within a mile of a banana peel, and he'll find it. And I think that that's the best description of Jerry Lewis I have ever read. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Alan. I love being with you again.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, start.
Are you going to be down there? All right, I'm going to be in
Beginning Monday, January 4th, inside the Comedy Mine with host Alan King, we'll move from 3 p.m. weekdays to 4 p.m. weekdays, and from 4:30 p.m. Saturdays to 1:30 p.m. Saturdays. Got it? But it'll still follow stand-up at 3 for the rest of the week, so you'll have some time to adjust to this horrible shock you're going to experience. Speaking of horrible shocks, now stay tuned as Marlo Thomas is that girl next here at Comedy Central.
Well,